Hey guys, how's it going? It's Danconia here, and welcome back to the Overwatch League Roundup. Stage 3, Week 4 results. Okay, so a little announcement before we go through the results of this week. There is going to be what I could call a mini-series, I suppose. Between Stage 3 and Stage 4, it will take place during the playoffs for Stage 3 as well. We're going to look at every single team. It's going to be called Win Conditions, and we will evaluate what each team has to do to reach the season playoffs. Now some, after this week's results, have already reached them. But we will look at each team and we'll see what they will have to do, because a lot of teams now will finish their Stage 3. So, thought I'd get that out of the way. But this week, we have seen some interesting results. Fair to say. It has been an horrific week for London. It's been a less than ideal week for the Shurk, but it's kind of, we've seen two sides of the Shurk this week. And Vancouver, well, they're Vancouver. But let's get into the results. So on Friday we had the Hangzhou Spark kicking off the week against Los Angeles Valiant. Now the Valiant are on a resurgence like we haven't seen before. It is quite crazy what the Valiant are doing with their new look lineup right now. They're DPS heavy comps, and they take the Hangzhou Spark very, very, very close. But the Spark do get past the Valiant 3-2, which is more than the Titans could do. So the Spark are looking really, really good, and I mean, they're looking right up there. They're actually catching the Shurk in terms of those overall standings, which is crazy, and they're above the Shurk in the stage standings. Hangzhou Spark are really becoming a team to fear, and as I said earlier on in this stage and last stage, they're reminding me more of the Philadelphia Fusion that we saw last year. They're growing into the league, and they're a team I certainly wouldn't want to play right now. And it doesn't matter who that is. Valiant now I wouldn't be too worried. A 3-2 against the Shurk against the Spark is not too bad. Paris Eternal up next against the Seoul Dynasty. This was a must-win for the Paris Eternal, and nope, Paris don't win it. They lose 3-1 to the Seoul Dynasty. Seoul kind of bouncing back after the loss of Fisher. We all know about what's happened with Fisher, and I don't know, I think it's perhaps a better thing. Yes, you lose the unpredictability of the Seoul lineup because you know they're going to play Marvel on the main tank, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. You want some consistency within your team. A lot of teams last year found that out. A 12-man roster doesn't always work. Seoul have made it work so far, but will it work in the long term is my question. 3-1 to the Seoul Dynasty then, and we move on to the Shock of the Week. Yes, pun intended. San Francisco Shock taking on the Chengdu Hunters. Now, Shock, another team that have been slightly slow to adapt to the meta that's developing. The more Sombra-based goats, or the more DPS-heavy teams. Chengdu are a team that is going to run the Sombra, or is going to run a heavy DPS at you. They're unlikely to run straight goats at you. And they beat the Shock in a 5-map thriller. 3-2, Chengdu Hunters take down the Shock, and the Shock lose for the second time this stage in 2 games which are entirely winnable. Bad losses for the Shock, although it doesn't really... Yes, they lose ground on New York and Vancouver, but it doesn't, it's not disastrous for the season. They're not realistically going to catch Vancouver now. So, you can forget about top seed in the division, and then it really doesn't matter. Because even if you were to come second above New York Excel, it wouldn't matter, because you still wouldn't get a second seed, you'd still get a third seed, because NYXL would top the other division. So, it really doesn't matter too much to the Shock, but it's not something they want to do. Right. Moving on. Great win for Chengdu, though. Moving on, we have the London Spitfire against the Los Angeles Valiant. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. Spitfire got rolled. Well and truly. This was the Spitfire we saw against the NYXL in the first game of this stage. Or the first week of this stage. This was a Spitfire that, it's just not even there. And for the first time, I have to criticize Profit. Profit has been not particularly effective on the Sombra. And that is the first time I'm ever saying that, because I don't really criticize Profit all that much. Because Profit is so versatile and so good at what he does, but he's come up short on the Sombra. And Valiant exposed this. Shax is a good Sombra. He's not the best Sombra, but he's a good Sombra, and he was better than Profit. And overall, the Valiant just looked miles better than London Spitfire did, and Spitfire deserved to go down 4-0. And as soon as they lost point control on certain maps, a lot of the time they would get first control, especially on the control-type maps, but once they lost that control, they didn't seem to know how to play the game anymore. We saw Winston solo tank. You cannot Winston solo tank. Not at any circumstance do you Winston solo tank, especially with Wrecking Ball in the game now. Winston's just so ineffective on his own. He has to be with another tank to be effective, especially D.Va. So I really don't know what London were playing at. But they weren't playing Overwatch. That's all I can say. They deserve to lose 4-0. Valiant, though, massive bounce back after the loss of Spark. And that did seal their playoff place. So, Valiant, they're well and truly back. Well and truly back. But next up, we had the Toronto Defiant taking on the Los Angeles Gladiators. Now, if you didn't know, this week, the Toronto Defiant have made two major signings. Mangachu and Logix. Now, you might know Logix from the Florida Mayhem of last year. Logix was one of their best players last year, Florida Mayhem, and one of the reasons why they actually got some wins on the board. Mangachu, we all know Mangachu. His hero pool is incredibly diverse. We've seen him this week roll out multiple different heroes, including the Torbjorn, and they've had different levels of success. Unfortunately, their first game would be the Los Angeles Gladiators. So, kind of throw them in at the deep end. This is a 4-0 for the Gladiators. There's some gelling to do with the Toronto Defiant, but it's the first team we've actually seen move from an all-Korean roster to a more mixed roster. It's kind of crazy, and I hope it works out, because it shows up the Florida Mayhem somewhat. Good 4-0 for the Gladiators, though. Toronto, they've got a gel. They've got a gel. Moving on after that, we had the Houston Outlaws taking on the Washington Justice. Which Houston Outlaws was going to turn up? Remember that Houston Outlaws lost to the Florida Mayhem last week. But it's the good Houston Outlaws. They beat the Washington Justice 3-0. They do what they need to get done. And Houston, they continue their revival somewhat. It was a fairly easy week for Houston, though. They needed to go 2-0 this week. Moving on after that, we had the Dallas Fuel taking on the New York Excelsior. Dallas Fuel, they brought back Taimu. Mr. Good Aim. Taimu, and he popped off as well. He popped off on the first two maps. And at half-time, it was 2-0 to the Dallas Fuel. But what are New York Excelsior very good at? In-game adjustments. And the fact that the Dallas Fuel subbed out Taimu for AKM at half-time probably didn't help either. So, New York Excelsior win this one 3-2. I'm not sure about subbing out Taimu. I don't think that was the best idea. Especially when we saw AKM play a lot of the Sombra and Widow that Taimu was playing anyway. So, I don't know, weird decision from the coaching lineup at Dallas Fuel, but I'm not one to question the coaching lineup. Because I'm not a coach myself. But it just seemed a bit odd to me. So, 3-2 for the New York Excelsior. New York Excelsior still unbeaten. Moving on, we had the Boston Uprising taking on the Philadelphia Fusion. We saw this game earlier on in the stage. And Boston have been coming up short a lot of times in this stage, and they do so again here. They lose 3-2 to the Fusion. Fusion, quietly, are grinding out some wins. Something they really needed to do. And we will see where it's got them in the stage standings and the overall standings in a minute. But they really grinded it out, and it's not good for Boston. But who knows what we'll see next stage. And you know what I mean by that. Moving on with the Florida Mayhem taking on the Hangzhou Spark. Again, no surprises here that the Hangzhou Spark take this 4-0. Florida Mayhem are still a team in complete disarray. They just can't compete. They just can't compete. Even with this new all-Korean lineup, yes, they tried some new players. They've brought in like 3 or 4 players now. in one go. They're trying to get them to gel, but Florida Mayhem, their season is almost completely over. You will see that when we look at win conditions. And yes, there's not much to say. Hangzhou Spark, keep marching on. Moving on after that, on Sunday, we had the Shanghai Dragons taking on the Guangzhou Charge. You should always expect that Shanghai Dragons should get the better of the Guangzhou Charge. They do indeed. 3-1 to the Shanghai Dragons. Shanghai Dragons are looking pretty bloomin' good right now. And when we look at the standings in a minute, they are well ahead of some of the chasing pack, which is more than we could have said perhaps near in Stage 2, where they were kind of in that dogfight. They are pulling ahead of that dogfight now. Moving on, we have the Game of the Week. Now, there seems to be a curse on the Game of the Week for the Overwatch League. Now, the Game of the Week actually looked like a really tasty one. It was the Gladiators taking on the Vancouver Titans. So, obviously, Titans coming off the back of the loss against the Valiant, their first loss in the regular season, sorry. Gladiators, they're just that pack behind the top three. And it shows at times, because Vancouver are just that bit more clinical, that bit more polished, and Vancouver run out 4-0 winners. So, and this is interesting because Vancouver's actually changed things up for this match after the Valiant loss. They've brought in Stitch. Stitch is now playing Sombra instead of So Min Soo, and it's proving to bear fruit. Stitch is a better Sombra than So Min Soo, and I would expect Vancouver to run Stitch all the time when they want Sombra now. But every game of the week at this stage, since they announced the Game of the Week segment, has been a 4-0. So the Overwatch League is still on for the golden stage. Moving on, we had the London Spitfire in action again against the San Francisco Shock. Oh dear. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. Oasis was 200-0 in favour of the Shock. Spitfire looked lost. Horizon was the highest scoring map, highest scoring 2CP map we've ever seen. It was 6-5 to the Shock in the end. 11 points, yeah. But London just couldn't compete with Shock. And again, it's like they didn't know what to do. They brought in Guard, who is their Sombra specialist that they hadn't been playing. Yes, weird, I know. And they subbed out, of all people, Prophet. Now, the thing is, they played Fury on Zarya, and they literally stuck to the same lineup throughout the match. It was Sombra Goats. It was Reinhardt, Zarya, Sombra, Brigitte, Lucio, and Zen. Or an Ana, depending on what Badosin felt like. But that doesn't really matter. But if you're playing Zarya permanently, why didn't you play Prophet? Because Prophet had been playing Zarya since basically week 2 of the season. So, why not play Prophet? I can understand you want Fury in there in case you have to go on some sort of dive. But the only reason I can see Fury being in there is in case they want to play a Diva, because that's about the only thing I haven't seen Prophet play. So, weird. Weird. Fury stats did keep up though, and Guard was a much better Sombra than Prophet was, and I think you have to expect that, considering he's a Sombra specialist. He got good value out of it, but the problem is, London, the rest of the team didn't seem to get value out of their Sombra. This is the thing, London don't seem to be able to work with a Sombra at the moment. They don't seem to be able to capitalise on the hacks or capitalise on the EMPs. So they're having very little... They're getting fewer kills from situations where they should be getting kills. And other teams in the league are better at this. So that's what London need to work on. But to be quite honest, we might not see Sombra Goats next stage, so you might not have to worry about it. San Francisco Shock, though, they do bounce back after the loss to Chengdu. They look good, as always. Moving on, we have the Houston Outlaws taking on the Toronto Defiant. Now, I got quite interested in what Toronto were running, actually, because for the first time in ages, we saw Toronto run 222. And I wonder whether this was in preparation for next stage, because they were playing Orisa, Diva, Mangachu on the Pharah, on Oasis, and they played Logix on the McCree, and they played Mercy Ana, I believe. That could be a Stage 4 meta if we're going into a 222. especially as we will see New McCree next stage. We also saw Logix run the Widow. He was incredibly good on the Widow. We saw Mangachu run pretty much anything. He was on Hanzo, he was on Torbjorn, he was on whatever he wanted to play. But they do end up losing to the Houston Outlaws 3-1. Houston, yeah, they do what they need to do. And this means that they are now in the stage playoffs, which is something we wouldn't have been saying at the start of this stage. So it's quite a story going on at the Valiant and the Houston Outlaws right now. And it's funny, they seem to be part of the same organisation now as well. Thinking. After this, though, we had the last game of the week, which was Chengdu Hunters taking on the Seoul Dynasty. And Chengdu, they just couldn't compete. Seoul Dynasty win this 3-0. Seoul actually looking fairly consistent this week, which is a change, because you never know what Seoul's going to turn up. But this was good from the Seoul, and I'd expect them to push on from here, but I believe that is the end of Seoul's stage. So, moving on to the standings, we have a lot of teams that have actually finished their stages. So, let's look at the stage standings. At top, we have New York Excelsior, the only team unbeaten. They play 2 games next week. They are on a 5-0 record, so we will see them in Atlanta. Moving on, we have teams that are on that have finished their stage, which is in second Vancouver Titans and in third Hangzhou Spark. They are pretty much on equal records. The only thing that puts Spark behind the Vancouver Titans is they've drawn 2 maps. That's the only thing. In fourth, we have the Shanghai Dragons. They have 2 games to play next week, and they should hopefully, looking at their games, make it to those stage playoffs. And then the next 4 teams have all finished their stage. That's the San Francisco Shock in 5th, the Seoul Dynasty in 6th, the Los Angeles Valiant in 7th, and the Houston Outlaws in 8th. They will all be in your stage playoffs. The only teams that are not definitely in are New York and Shanghai, although I don't expect this top 8 to change all that much. Just outside we have the Philadelphia Fusion, they're still in it. So are the Los Angeles Gladiators in 10th on a 4-3 record, though I would be very surprised to see them make it. Then we have the Paris Eternal, the Chengdu Hunters, the London Spitfire in 13th. London are out. In 14th we have the Guangzhou Charge. 15th, and... no, actually they're not in it. In 15th we have the Florida Mayhem, possibly one of the highest finishes in a stage. Dallas Fuel in 16th. Boston in 16th, joint 16th with Dallas Fuel on a 1-6 record. Not too good of a stage for those. And then the bottom 3, who are winless right now, actually have 2 games to play next week. So that's Atlanta Reign, Toronto Defiant, and the Washington Justice. So there is an opportunity for Boston or Dallas to, well, Boston to finish bottom this stage or something like that. Florida do have to play 2 games, so do Guangzhou Charge. Guangzhou Charge are still in with a chance of stage playoffs, but it's unlikely. The same for Gladiators. Fusion could do it, considering they've only lost 2. And yeah, that's about it. Because the 3 and 4 teams, which is London, Chengdu, and Paris, they're definitely out. Moving on to the overall standings, and this is where it gets a bit of a painful reading for Spitfire. So, at the top we have the Vancouver Titans. They are our first team to secure a top 6 place. They will be in Philadelphia for the playoffs. First team to do so. In second, we have the New York Excelsior. They are guaranteed a top 12 finish, so they will definitely at least be in the play-ins with a chance to go to Philadelphia. They are the only 2 teams locked in right now. In third, we have the San Francisco Shock losing ground on the Excelsior. Hangzhou Spark in 4th, catching them slightly. Los Angeles Gladiators in 5th, Shanghai Dragons in 6th. Philadelphia Fusion moving up to 7th, been a very good week for the Philadelphia Fusion. Seoul Dynasty up to 8th, London Spitfire moving down all the way to 9th. It's been a bad week for London, and need I say, they have never gone 0-4 twice in a week. It has been London's worst week in their history. Let that sink in. In 10th, we have the Dallas Fuel. They are a slight way behind London. Chengdu Hunters in 11th. Valiant in 12th. They are now in the play-ins, Valiant. Blumenach, Water Rejuvenation, and then Houston are just outside the play-ins in 13th. 14th, we have the Paris Eternal. 15th, we have the Boston Uprising. 16th, we have the Atlanta Reign. 17th, we have the Toronto Defiant. 18th, we have the Guangzhou Charge. And the 2 teams on the precipice of being eliminated from the overall playoffs are Washington Justice and Florida Mayhem in the 19th and 20th places, with only 2 wins on the board all season. Okay. So, it's been a bad week for Spitfire. It's been a good week for Spark and some other teams. Next week, we go to Atlanta, and there will be a lot less games. But it is very friendly EU times, so that's good, I guess. But we will see New York Excelsior in action. We will also see the Philadelphia Fusion action. There are some games that are crucial to playoffs, but not too many. A lot of it is actually sealed up at this point. But I am going to leave it here. This has been longer than I wanted it to be. It's because there's been a lot going on this week. But we will see the Atlanta Reign homestand next week. And then after that, we will go through the win conditions of all 20 teams. Vancouver have already met their win conditions, basically. So we will talk about that a bit more when we go take on Vancouver. I will do it in order of league standings as well. So Vancouver will be first. And we will go from there. Stage 4 should be blimmin' interesting. If the rumours are to be true and the leaks are to be true. But I'm going to leave it here for this one. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you liked it, give it a like, subscribe if you're new, and I will see you in the next video. See you then.